So maybe for educational purposes, can you explain a little bit what is the differences, the trade-offs, the benefits, the pros and cons between an AMM model and a order book model?
Yeah, absolutely. So an AMM is usually a simple swap mechanism, usually spot, where there's liquidity pools, liquidity providers providing in those liquidity pools, but it basically doesn't allow you to specify price and allow for like sophisticated order types. So if you think of most institutional traders, they build algorithms, right, when they're placing maker orders, but even on the taker side, meaning like placing orders on the order book for liquidity purposes. Did I lose you there? I might have lost you for a second.
No, I'm still here.
Cool. And essentially, these algorithms that these institutions are building require sophisticated order types, right, as part of their algorithms. So basically, there's just a lot more flexibility on an order book model than there is on an AMM, and that mostly comes from specificity, right? Because if I only want to be able to trade a position at a certain price, and I don't want to buy it at the market price with a certain amount of slippage, you couldn't do that in an AMM. The other thing that I think is really beneficial of order book models is ancillary kind of strategies. So like, let's say, I guess you could even be like a Bitcoin miner, or like you're a hedge fund having a position in a certain token. If you want to be able to hedge that exposure, right, then you would want to do that on an order book, right? Not only because there's more liquidity, but because you could specify like which price you want to be able to sell at, do like stop loss orders, etc.
And then what were some of the bottlenecks that you guys discovered or that you guys had to struggle with over the past few months? Because again, in the beginning, I think it was all natively on Ethereum. Then you launched on Starkware, which helped more with scalability, I guess. But what were some of the bottlenecks? Because I always think, like, when I hear dYdX, like the Ethereum community is very proud of you guys, that you're like betting so hard and like using Ethereum technology. But what were some of the bottlenecks and trade-offs that you had to make on being on Ethereum?
Yeah, great question. So I think the best way to think about this is thinking about the current state of affairs with the V3 like Starkware built protocol. And that's in terms of product experience. I think we're pretty good. I'd say we have like the best UX for DeFi. I think we're still getting to a level where DeFi is as good as CeFi, but I think we're pushing that boundary. And like, as we said before, the experience is pretty good. That's both on the API and the front end. I also think we do pretty good in terms of features, at least for DeFi. I think we can do better, like have spot and other order types, and also list more markets, but we're pretty good on the product side in terms of features. I also think in terms of security that we value that very high, and obviously we care about security. I think that's been really great on dYdX as well. But I think on the decentralization piece, we always knew we could do better. Considering the current state of the order book, we are non-custodial, which I think is one of the most important parts, but we're not fully censorship resistant because the current order book exists on a centralized server. And I think one framing that Antonio put forward that's good to think about is that a decentralized system is measured by its weakest part. So if the goal of any system is to be truly decentralized, you really think of it as a sum of parts, and you can only measure it based on its least decentralized piece. So we want to get to a place where the entire system is decentralized, and only Cosmos really allowed for that product experience. We think that the UX will be as good as V3. And we really are, which is really tough because a lot of the infrastructure isn't really built out yet. But we've been very focused on this and kind of helping push the bounds in the Cosmos community and think the product experience. And I think the product experience will be very close to what it is in V3. And V3 is really nice and kind of feels like trading on a SEX currently. But the system will probably be slightly higher latency. We won't be too far off from a SEX, and from a feature perspective, we'll have all the same as V3 at launch, and hopefully soon more after, like I mentioned. And I could kind of go through a little more of the thinking of like why we chose Cosmos for that reason, if that makes sense.
Yeah, architecture. Would be cool, I think, if you can, before we do that, elaborate a little bit more what you mean by decentralization, right? Because decentralization has different layers, has different meanings and perceptions also for different people. So what exactly do you mean by decentralization in that context?
Yeah, so specifically being censorship resistant. So like any piece of the stack not controlled by like one person in a system, but rather like be like, I guess, like consensus mechanism, or like not even consensus mechanisms, rather just like being able to have like multiple layers of defense, right? Because I think a perfect example of this is the architecture thinking for the next version of dYdX, which is that the order books, like in V3, will be off chain, although it will exist in a decentralized manner where each validator will have a full version of the order book. And that will, and the most meaningful part of that is it won't require consensus, right? Which is like the bottleneck to any blockchain, right? Because that's like what makes blockchain slow, right? Its speed is based on its consensus mechanism. So that offers high speeds and high throughput while also being decentralized. So yeah, I think the best framing for like what decentralization means is it being censorship resistant.
Okay. Yeah.